Hi, my name's Dick, John Dick, here again to fill your ear hole with my scummy goodness. In this video development blog, we'll talk about climbing and vaulting. For those of you who still don't know, SCUM is an open-world survival game set in the near future with a realistic approach to gameplay. To be honest with you, we never considered mentioning vaulting and climbing as features, but since some other games advertise them as their main feature, we decided to at least explain how they'll work in SCUM. Picture yourself as this well-built guy enjoying his run when suddenly you get surrounded by a group of drunks leaving the club early in the morning. Luckily for you, SCUM allows you to keep your momentum and move fluidly through the level to avoid accidental pukes. But before we get into the details, we have to go back in time to explain how everything started. God, I love this part. Before we even started working on SCUM, we tried many different survival games to experience the best and the worst that they can offer to players. One of them had this particular problem with basic things like doors. In this section, we've recreated a scenario that happened to us in that particular game on more than one occasion. Also, things could get a lot worse if someone was chasing you because these damn doors would stop you or push you aside most of the time, resulting in frustration and sometimes even death. So we decided the doors will have to open in a way to allow player movement to be fluid. This might be a small thing, but in combination with vaulting and climbing, it turned out to be a great feature. In some occasions, the best features in games are those that you don't notice when they happen. The idea is to keep the player concentrating on important stuff and to reduce the amount of frustration when performing repetitive, simple tasks. Now let's talk about vaulting and climbing. Here you have two very old pals, Stan on the left and Oliver on the right. They have different body attributes and different skills because, after all, they're different, unique people. In SCUM, all characters are unique and all their attributes and knowledge can be changed in the game, as they are subject to change in real life. Notice that not only they are moving at different paces, their vaulting and climbing speeds are also different. Stan has much better constitution, and his high dexterity makes him much faster than Oliver. He also has a lot more stamina and can run for a longer time. On the other hand, Oliver is a very smart guy and he has a big juicy brain. Having a friend in need is great, but having a slower buddy when zombies are chasing you, that's a lifesaver. In this part, you can see two guys that are physically identical, but they're packed with a different amount of gear. The guy on the left has around 13 kilos of gear distributed over his body, while the guy on the right has been collecting some precious items and has more than 60 kilograms in his inventory. The sheer amount of gear has stopped him from running. He's forced to jog all the time. In life-threatening situations, speed can be essential for survival. It's advisable that you drop all excessive gear if you need to escape quickly. Things that you leave behind might be enough to attract pursuers and stop them from chasing you further. Also, keep in mind that climbing and vaulting with that amount of weight will drain your stamina faster, making you weaker and slower with each step. From all you've seen so far, it's clear that you don't have to go around obstacles like in some survival games, searching for broken fences or doors to go through. We made vaulting and climbing in order to allow players to move continuously through the level, but we also made them in a way that your character's abilities and gear will influence them all the time. It's easy to see that some animations are not perfect, some of them even look funny, but hell, if you want to see more funny stuff, you should see our budget too. However, climbing and vaulting mechanics work really well, and visuals can be easily polished during early access. Just imagine what else can be done if you show us some love. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll have free climbing and parkour in the game also. More or less, that was everything we wanted to show you about vaulting and climbing. As we've said before, it's nothing special. It's just a feature that'll keep you focused on the gameplay instead of going crazy trying to get through a door. Furthermore, there are a lot of questions about the release date and if there will be a testing phase or not. The game has entered the first closed pre-alpha testing phase. We have a squad of badass U.S. Marines testing the game as we speak. Thank you for watching, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and our development blog at www.scumgame.com to find out more about things that will follow the first testing phase. Ooh-ah! By the way, did you notice this little cool thing that we did in the background? Watch closer. When the player is in third-person perspective and is standing behind an obstacle that obstructs his character's vision, all the things in the background are blurred out. We use depth of field to reduce the advantage of third-person perspective over first-person perspective. The best thing is that it wasn't entirely our idea. It actually came from the Steam community pages, and we thought it would be great to have it in the game. It still has to be tested, though, but how cool is that? The game hasn't even been released yet, and we've already implemented some features requested by our community. That's you. Love you guys. You're great. Urging you to save the noble lemming. Okay, now that we've sorted out the important stuff, let's talk about wetness in SCUM. Now, before you just go and wet yourself, there's a few things you should know. So I'm going to jump right into this video blog. So, what's different between SCUM and other survival games when it comes to getting wet? Let me explain it by examining this sharp-dressed young man. It's easy to see that he's fully capable of surviving almost anything that nature can throw at him. The secret of his success is multiple layers of clothing that SCUM supports. Each piece of cloth has important properties like heat insulation, armor, inventory slots, and finally, there's a wetness property. All of these parameters are defined by material, meaning that a flannel shirt will perform differently than a leather jacket. As you can see from the inventory perspective, there are groups of layers per body region. The top group is assigned to the character's head, the middle one covers the torso area, while the bottom part is for legs and feet. By stacking layers of clothing, you combine their parameters in the same way you would do in real life. When it comes to layered clothing, your grandma was right. It helps you to adapt to any weather condition possible. So how can you get wet in the game? The most obvious way is by sweating. While performing tasks, the body will heat up. In an attempt to cool you down, the body responds with perspiration. This kind of moisture is propagated from the inside out and also causes additional fluid loss or dehydration. The next way is the impact of the weather. To avoid getting wet in rain, try to find a dry spot fast, or wear at least some water-resistant gear. Being drenched in the rain during cold weather will impact the immune system, and your character will probably get different parts of the clothing can absorb or retain different percentages of water. As in real life, some parts of the body can become wetter than others. In SCUM, we handle wetness per body part along with separate layers of clothes that can have different wetness values also. This means that parts of your gear can be dry or wet depending on what you do. Body parts that are covered separately are feet, legs, torso, hands, and head. If you're standing in the water up to your waistline, then only your legs and feet will be wet. The rest of your body will stay dry. Also, if you jump into the water, your gear will almost instantly become fully wet, even if you have a raincoat or some other water-resistant clothing that isn't fully sealed. It will not help you to stay dry. The success formula here is, if you want to keep your gear dry, stay away from the bodies of water, or at least drop everything to the ground before you enter. In this section of the video, our guy has just practiced some swimming in the shallow waters, keeping his gear with him to protect it from thieves and bears. He did leave an old orange shirt on the beach in case he's gonna need some dry clothes later, or at least that's what we were thinking he was up to. However, his plan was much more sinister. He actually decided to wear a dry shirt below his other clothes with the intention to deceive the game, to make it think that he has dry clothes on, simply because the first dry clothing layer is closest to the skin. In all other games, this would be called exploiting or cheating, but here in SCUM, we don't care about that, simply because we have fluid diffusion and osmosis built into the game. For those of you who don't know, diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration, meaning that his dry orange t-shirt will soon become a wet orange t-shirt. After everything you've seen so far, if you still think that it's okay to jump into deep water with all your gear on, Take a moment to see what happened to our dear Adolf last year. That particular summer day, he was showing off at the pier. He accidentally fell into the water along with his traveling backpack on his back. To make things even worse, the backpack was full of his mother's lingerie. The next thing you know, all that stuff simply pulled him directly to the bottom. The only way to survive in this kind of situation is to drop excessive weight until the buoyancy pulls you up. The amount of gear that your character can carry while swimming largely depends on your swimming skill and stamina. Sooner or later, you'll become tired and most likely, you'll sink. It's as simple as that. Now, let's talk about ways of drying your stuff off once it becomes wet. The easiest way to dry your clothes is by using the heat of your body in combination with the air temperature and wind. This is particularly useful during the summer when wet clothes keep you cool and safe from the excessive sweating and dehydration. Also, it's good to know that if you keep moving, your body will get warmer and you'll dry your clothes faster. In the current example, you can see that simply by standing in the sunlight, you can dry your gear. Also, you can see that the helmet has dried much faster than the backpack because they're different materials. In the situations where air temperature is low, you can use heat sources to dry your clothes. How fast something will dry depends on many factors, such as the material type. Items that conduct heat better will be dried faster. The amount of water absorbed. If more water is absorbed, it takes more time for clothes to dry. Relative humidity. If humidity in the air is high, drying gets slower and dry clothes can even get wet. Wind helps a lot in drying by carrying the water vapor away, preventing any concentration of moisture on the clothes. Air temperature. Higher temperatures will help to dry clothes faster. Then the number of wet layers stacked. Keeping wet clothing stacked on you is bad, and it slows down the drying time significantly. In the current example, the player is using fire as a heat source to dry his clothes. Notice how the distance from the fire source influences the speed of his drying clothes. While the shirt, being closest to the fire, is almost dry, a jock jacket is a bit damp. On the other hand, pants that were on the character the whole time are still fully wet since they were far away from the heat source. To reduce drying time, keep your wet clothes spread near the heat source. Also, if you don't have any spare dry clothes, make sure not to freeze to death while waiting for your clothes to dry. Okay, for now, this is more or less everything you need to know about wetting yourself in SCUM. All that you've seen is still a work in progress and is subject to change. In the future, we plan to improve things even more, add some new ways of getting wet, but you can also find your own ways by being a creative player. We hope that you've enjoyed watching this video. Be sure to follow SCUM on Steam, Facebook, Twitter, and our development blog, www.scumgame.com.